The glass doors said no public entry. Daniel Cole folded the notice into his chef's coat and turned the lock. Outside, 63 stranded travelers were leaving a coach and 7 vehicles in driving snow. By the time CEO Claire Bennett reached the lobby, wet coats covered chairs beneath chandeliers not meant to turn on until Monday. "Who opened those doors?" she asked. Daniel stepped away from the reception desk. "I did." The deputy lowered his radio. The highway had closed in both directions, and the county warming center had just lost its heat. Claire looked past Daniel to the doors, where another gust pressed snow against the glass. Her first order was not to put anyone back outside. She told the desk clerk to stop admitting new arrivals until they knew who was already inside, then asked the deputy for a count and the county's current plan. "They're not inventory," Daniel said. "No," Claire replied. "They're people in a building that wasn't staffed to receive them. I need to know how many—" Her answer checked him. He had expected a demand to clear the lobby, not a question he should already have answered. The deputy moved toward the coach driver. Claire asked the desk clerk to record names by traveling party and note anyone who needed an accessible room or help beyond a place to sit. She kept her directions plain. No one was asked for a credit card. No one was promised a room. Daniel's phone vibrated against his hip. The message was from Elena Vargas, who lived 2 doors down in the staff residence. His 12-year-old daughter, Sophie, had finished her homework, eaten dinner, and wanted to know whether he was still bringing home cinnamon rolls. He typed that she was safe where she was and that he would call before bedtime. It was the kind of exchange Claire could understand without asking. Daniel was not merely the chef who had opened her lodge. Somewhere behind the service road, a child was waiting for him to finish his shift. "My daughter's with someone I trust," Daniel said when Claire glanced toward the phone. "You don't need to plan for her." "Good," Claire said. "Then help me plan for the people who are here." The count came together in 10 minutes. 46 passengers and 2 drivers had arrived on the coach. 11 more travelers had come from 6 cars stopped behind it. A family of 4 had walked over from a disabled SUV before the closure became official. The total was 63. Claire wrote the number on a whiteboard behind the desk. The county expects to move them as soon as the warming center is available. Until then, the lobby stays open. Daniel did not answer. The coach driver, standing close enough to hear, looked at him. That was when Claire saw the problem. "What did you tell them?" she asked. Daniel rested both hands on the counter. "I told them we wouldn't put them back on the road. If the highway stayed closed, I told them they could stay here tonight." Claire's marker stopped above the board. "You told 63 people they had rooms. I told them they wouldn't be sent into the storm." "Those are not the same promise." Daniel looked toward a gray-haired couple sharing one dry scarf between them. "They didn't need contract language when they came through that door, and the staff didn't agree to work through the night. Housekeeping didn't agree to turn rooms that aren't ready. You made a promise with their time and this building's capacity." He had no answer that would make her wrong. Opening the lobby had been immediate. Promising the night had reached beyond him, and he had known it even as the words left his mouth. He had expected permission to follow necessity. He had not considered that permission belonged partly to people whose names were not on the glass doors or the company letterhead. "I won't take it back while the road is closed," Daniel said. "But I'll tell you exactly what we can support. That's what I needed before you promised it." Claire capped the marker and turned to the desk clerk. For the next hour, the lobby would be treated as a temporary warming space. The main entrance would remain monitored. Traveling parties would stay together. The deputy would notify them before anyone new was sent over. Daniel went to the kitchen. The food prepared for Monday's reopening reception would feed the people in the lobby if he simplified it. Soup, bread, roasted vegetables, coffee. Nothing required the full banquet crew. He called 2 cooks who lived in the staff residence and asked whether they were willing to come over. He did not tell them Claire had approved it until she actually had. Claire approved 4 hours of overtime, then caught his eye through the service window. No more promises without a count. No more decisions about the kitchen without asking the kitchen, he said. It was not agreement, but it gave them a line neither could cross without the other noticing. The first bowls had reached the lobby when the county emergency coordinator called back. The warming center's boiler could not be restored that night. Snowplows had been pulled from the upper pass because visibility had fallen below the county's operating limit. The coach would not be permitted onto the highway. and no transfer vehicles were coming. Claire listened without interrupting. Daniel watched her write down the details, one beneath another. Before she asked how long the closure might last, the coordinator would not promise a reopening time. The current planning window was 18 hours. Claire ended the call and set the phone on the desk. Around them, 63 people were eating under lights meant for a ceremony that would no longer happen as planned. The lobby can hold them for a few hours, she said. It cannot hold them all night. Daniel looked toward the hallway leading to the guest elevators. Then we find out what can... They started with the West Wing because it was the only part of the lodge scheduled to open on Monday. 28 rooms had been cleaned, heated, and stocked. The East Wing remained winterized. Its plumbing had not been brought fully online, and Claire refused to treat an emergency as permission to improvise around that fact. Daniel agreed. He knew the building well enough to understand which shortcuts became other people's emergencies. The available rooms did not solve the count. Claire and Marisol, the housekeeping supervisor, grouped the list by families, couples, and people already traveling together. 46 people could be placed in the 28 rooms without asking strangers to share. 17 adults remained. The lodge had 2 conference rooms on the ground floor. Their exit routes were clear. Their occupancy limits were posted, and the deputy contacted the fire department to confirm they could be used as sleeping areas if the furniture was moved and the aisles stayed open. County Emergency Management could release cots and blankets from a nearby cache once a plow escorted the supply truck down the service road. That answered space. It did not answer labor. Marisol asked who would inspect each room before a key left the desk. Daniel started to say that facilities could handle it, then stopped when he saw the staffing sheet in her hand. Facilities meant him and 1 maintenance technician who was already keeping the loading entrance clear and monitoring the boilers. Claire divided the check instead. Housekeeping would confirm linens and occupancy. Facilities would confirm heat and water. And no room would be released until both initials appeared beside its number. The extra step cost time, but it prevented the emergency from becoming an excuse to guess. 9 employees were already in the lodge. 4 more, including Daniel's 2 cooks, were in the staff residence before the road closed. 13 people could cover the lobby, kitchen, West Wing, conference rooms, and building systems only if they worked in shifts. No one could be assigned as though the night had no end. Daniel studied the staffing sheet. He had imagined opening rooms. He had not pictured Marisol choosing which housekeepers lost their sleep, or the desk clerk being responsible for 63 names until morning. I should have asked them before I told the coach they could stay, he said. Claire did not use the admission against him. Ask them now. Make it clear that no one loses a shift next week for saying no tonight. He went person by person. 2 employees declined the overnight extension because of family responsibilities. Daniel thanked them and adjusted the plan. The remaining staff divided into 3 teams, each with a protected rest period. In the kitchen, the cost of the night became visible in labeled trays. The food had been purchased for lenders, local officials, and travel partners expected at the reopening reception. Using it now meant canceling the event. Canceling the event meant losing the lodge's best chance to demonstrate that it could operate through the winter. Daniel had assumed Claire could replace anything he used by approving a larger number. She explained that the lodge had missed 2 seasonal targets. The refinancing committee had made Monday's reopening one of the conditions for releasing the next phase of capital. If she canceled it, the company would have to explain why before the bank decided whether to wait. So don't cancel it, Daniel said. Use what's already open. And feed 63 people what? He looked at the shelves. The regular inventory would not cover the lobby, staff, and a reception 3 days later. He could stretch portions, but that would only turn a decision into a quieter form of denial. Claire called finance. She canceled the reception, authorized the food, and approved the overnight payroll. Her voice remained even. Only after the call ended did she close the event binder and move it to the bottom of the stack. That buys dinner and staff, she said. It doesn't open the rooms. Daniel understood the distinction now. She was not withholding rooms because she valued them more than the people downstairs. She was refusing to spend a resource until she knew it would solve the problem. His first plan was to keep most travelers in the lobby, place families in the ready rooms, and wait for an early road opening. Claire's was to maintain the lodge as a warming facility until the county found another destination, Neither plan survived the next assessment. The fire captain said the lobby could not become an overnight sleeping area without blocking circulation. The county coordinator said no other facility would be ready before morning. The latest highway report made an early opening unlikely. At the same time, Claire's board chair asked for one name to hold decision authority. The company would continue supporting the response, but it would not accept two people making commitments independently. Daniel stood beside the operations board while Claire ended that call. The board already showed the head count, the 13 available employees, the 28 rooms, and the 2 conference rooms. What it did not show was who could say yes. "You want final authority?" Daniel said. "I have legal authority. That doesn't tell me whether the kitchen can serve breakfast or whether the West Wing can stay staffed. And if I say it can't, then it can't." He waited, expecting a qualification. Claire drew a line down the center of a blank operations sheet. On her side, she wrote rooms, payroll, purchasing, and corporate approval. On his, she wrote kitchen, facilities, staffing capacity, and service limits. "I authorize the use of the property," she said. "You certify what this team can actually operate. Either of us can stop a decision if the condition on our side isn't met." Daniel read the sheet twice. "No promises from me without your authorization. No commitments from me without your capacity check. And if your board calls, they get the same answer the county gets." It was not equality. Claire still employed him, owned the rooms, and answered to people Daniel would never meet. But it was a real division of authority, and both names would sit beneath it. Daniel signed first. Claire signed beside him. At 7:30, Claire canceled Monday's public reopening and released the 28-room keys. Daniel gathered the staff at the operations board. He did not tell them that everything had been handled. He explained the limits. The West Wing only 2 conference rooms, 3 staff rotations, and no intake beyond the county's existing list without another joint decision. Then he addressed the promise he had made. "I told everyone they could stay," he said. "I said that before I knew what staying required. We can support tonight under this plan. If the county asks for more, we check the people in the building before I give another answer." Claire stayed beside the board while he spoke. She could have corrected him publicly or presented the decision as an executive rescue. Instead, she handed the first set of keys to Marisol and asked Daniel which team he needed in the kitchen. The West Wing elevators began carrying people upstairs. Staff moved tables from the conference rooms while the deputy marked clear aisles. The county supply truck arrived behind a plow with cots, blankets, and bottled water. Claire kept the East Wing keys sealed in their cabinet. Daniel did not challenge her. The plumbing there remained outside the operating plan, and neither of them would improve the night's numbers by placing people in rooms the staff could not support for convenience, optics, or speed. For the first time that evening, the lobby became quieter rather than louder. The plan did not run perfectly. A couple who had boarded the coach separately had been listed as 2 individuals and assigned to different areas. Daniel caught the mistake when one of them refused a room without the other. He brought it to Claire instead of rearranging the list himself. She corrected it and opened the vacated cot without asking why the desk clerk had missed the relationship. An hour earlier, Daniel would have taken the key, moved the names, and explained the change when someone noticed. This time he waited while Claire checked whether the reassignment displaced anyone else. Claire, in turn, did not make him stand beside the counter while she verified his judgment. She asked one question, received a useful answer, and changed the list. The exchange lasted less than a minute. It saved no one from the storm, but it showed the staff that shared authority could move faster than 2 people protecting their territory. Later, Claire assigned the last accessible room to a traveler whose note on the list had been too vague. Daniel knew the room's bathroom rail had been replaced but not rechecked after the work. He did not simply move the guest. He told Claire the room could not be certified, and she withdrew the key in front of the desk staff without defending her decision. They found another room and adjusted the conference room count. No one was placed in the East Wing. The kitchen created a different problem. Daniel's first schedule kept both experienced cooks on duty until midnight, leaving breakfast to employees who knew service but not the lodge's equipment. Claire noticed the gap while checking payroll hours. "You built the schedule around dinner," she said. "Dinner is what's in front of us. Breakfast will be in front of us at 6, Daniel looked at the names and saw she was right. His instinct was to hold every capable person close until the immediate pressure passed. It was the same instinct that had made him promise the night before anyone else could choose it. He sent one cook to rest and moved himself onto the early breakfast shift. Claire rearranged the front desk rotation to match. Neither announced that the other had corrected a mistake. A well-dressed traveler objected when he learned that his room was smaller than the one assigned to a family from the disabled SUV. Claire listened, checked that he had no accessibility need, and kept the assignments unchanged. "The rooms are being allocated by traveling party in need," she told him, "not by what anyone expected to pay tonight." Daniel heard the answer from the kitchen doorway. It did not fit the woman he had expected when she first walked into the lobby. He had prepared himself to fight someone who measured every choice in revenue. Claire was measuring. She was simply measuring more than one cost. Near midnight, Daniel found her helping the desk clerk reconcile the room list with the head count. Her sleeves were rolled once at the wrists, and a paper cup of coffee had gone cold beside her. She had not retreated to the executive suite or handed the night to people lower on the payroll. He set a bowl of soup on the counter. "Kitchen count says everyone was served. Staff too, including you." That sounded like a capacity question. It was. He took the second bowl from the tray and leaned against the far end of the counter. The distance between them remained professional, but the argument in the lobby no longer occupied all of it. Daniel's phone lit with Sophie's name. He answered and stepped toward the service corridor. Sophie was safe, irritated that he had missed the cinnamon rolls, and trying to stay awake until he came home. He promised breakfast instead, then caught himself and amended it. He would call in the morning, and they would decide breakfast after he knew when he could leave. When he returned, Claire had heard enough to understand the correction. "You practice that often?" she asked. "Not enough." Daniel explained that his position included the small apartment in the staff residence. If the job ended, the lease allowed a transition period, but employment and home were connected. He did not offer the information as leverage. Claire had asked whether he could rest after breakfast, and the answer depended on whether he could reach Sophie without leaving the lodge understaffed. Claire told him Monday's reopening had carried similar weight for other families. If refinancing stalled long enough, the company would reduce the winter operation rather than fund a lodge that could not show it was ready. The 13 people working that night were part of a much larger payroll. Then canceling the reception put their jobs at risk, Daniel said. Not canceling it would have required pretending we still had the food and the staff. He nodded. She had not chosen people over numbers. She had refused to falsify one in order to protect the other. At 1 a.m, the county asked whether the lodge could maintain operations through the next road assessment. The coordinator estimated another 6 hours but would not guarantee it. Daniel did not answer first. He checked the breakfast inventory, the facilities log, and the remaining staff hours. Claire checked the West Wing count, overtime authorization, and county supply commitment. Kitchen and facilities can support 6 more hours if the rest schedule holds, Daniel said. Claire asked Marisol to confirm the room side. When she did, Claire told the coordinator the lodge could continue until 7, subject to a new assessment if the highway remained closed. It was the second promise of the night. This one belonged to everyone who would have to keep it. The staff heard the decision from both Daniel and Claire. The operations board carried both names. For 2 hours, the arrangement worked well enough that no one had to ask which person mattered more. That success reached the board before the next weather report did. At 3 a.m, Claire took a call in the small conference office. The board chair, general counsel, and corporate operations director were waiting. They had approved the emergency spending and accepted the cancellation of the reopening reception. They would continue providing remote logistics and payroll support. But the company's insurer required a single executive chain of authority for the remainder of the event. Daniel could continue cooking and advising on facilities. He could not remain a named decision-maker after admitting that he had opened the lodge and promised overnight accommodation without authorization. Claire argued that the shared structure was precisely why the lodge had stabilized. The board chair did not dispute the result. He disputed the company's exposure if a non-management employee continued to commit the property after exceeding his authority once already. The condition was not cruel. That made it harder to reject. Corporate operations could keep the scheduling system, purchasing approvals, and payroll extensions active. In return, Claire had to move final operational authorization under her name and a remote corporate manager. The board wanted the change posted before the next staff rotation. "I need to speak with Daniel," Claire said. "You need to confirm the chain within 10 minutes, counsel replied. "You can explain it after." 10 minutes was enough to find him. He was in the kitchen 30 yards away. Claire knew that. She also knew he would argue, not because he wanted status, but because they had made a specific promise about shared decisions. An argument could consume the window and place payroll support in question. She chose the result over the consultation. Claire accepted the condition. Before ending the call, she required the board to state that Daniel's removal from command was not a finding of misconduct and did not change his pay during the emergency. Council agreed, and the corporate manager confirmed it in the scheduling system. Claire had protected what she could without reopening the decision itself. That distinction mattered to the company. She suspected it would matter much less to Daniel, who had been promised a voice rather than merely a paycheck. The remote manager's name appeared on the operations board before Daniel returned from checking the conference rooms. His own name had been removed from the authorization line and placed under department leads. A front desk employee asked him whether the 6 o'clock breakfast service still required his approval or corporate operations. Daniel looked at the board, then at Claire. "When did this change?" he asked. "The board made continued support conditional on executive control. I agreed so the payroll and logistics authorizations would remain active." "You agreed before you asked me. They gave me 10 minutes. You used 3 of them, changing the board." Claire lowered her voice. "I was going to explain once the handoff was secure. That's what I did at the door. I decided what had to happen, and I planned to explain after." She could have told him the stakes were different. They were different in scale and authority, but not in the part that mattered between them. She'd removed his choice because she believed the answer mattered more than the way they reached it. Daniel did not walk away from the lodge. He called the incoming staff team together, transferred the facility's limits to the corporate manager, and confirmed that the kitchen schedule would hold through 7. He made the handoff complete enough that no employee had to choose between loyalty to him and Claire's authority. Only then did he remove his copy of the shared plan from the operations board. "The lodge is covered," he told Claire. "You didn't need to take my name off before you spoke to me." "You needed not to ask." The sentence landed harder because he did not raise his voice. Claire watched the next staff rotation hesitate over questions that had been simple an hour earlier. The remote corporate manager did not know which service elevator had been unreliable during cold starts or which pantry held the breakfast backup. Every answer still came from Daniel, but now had to travel through another person before becoming a decision. She had protected the formal chain and weakened the working one. At 5:30, Council sent Daniel a 2-page offer for the 7 o'clock call. He would remain on paid leave during the review. If he lost his job, he and Sophie would have 8 weeks to leave the staff residence, and the company would not mark his record as reckless or demand repayment of the emergency costs. The offer gave him time to find another kitchen, another apartment, and another route to Sophie's school. In return, he had to let the board describe the night in one clean sentence. He had acted alone, and Claire had taken control. The sentence began with the truth and ended before the rest of it. Daniel had opened the doors and made a promise he had no authority to make. Claire had imposed the first limits, but she had also opened 28 rooms, canceled the reception, and put her name beside his on the plan. The board was not asking Daniel to lie about what he had done. It was asking him to stop speaking before her choice became visible. Daniel read the housing provision twice. Claire stood across the office, watching his thumb remain on the line that protected Sophie's address. "You should take the transition period," Claire said. "Is that advice from the CEO or from the person who signed the plan with me? From someone who knows your daughter shouldn't pay for a decision she didn't make?" Daniel set the terms down. "Neither should 63 people disappear from the part you chose." He did not tell Claire what he would say. At 7, 4 faces appeared on the conference office screen. The county coordinator joined by phone because the lodge was still sheltering travelers. Through the open door, Daniel could see the operations board with Claire's name beside a remote manager's. His own name remained lower down. Under kitchen, the board chair skipped the chronology council had prepared. Mr. Cole. Did Ms. Bennett tell you to open those doors? No, Daniel said. I made both decisions before I asked her. Opening the lobby was necessary. Promising the night was beyond my authority. And it committed staff who had not agreed. That part is mine. And after she arrived, did she take control? Daniel glanced once at the operations board, visible through the open door. His name was still absent. She established the first temporary system. He said, after the warming center failed, she canceled the reopening, opened 28 West Wing rooms and 2 conference rooms, authorized 13 staff, and signed the extended operation with me. She didn't only contain what I did, she chose what happened next. Counsel leaned toward the camera. The question is, who was in charge? That's the chain. Daniel replied, I acted alone first. We acted together after, then she removed me without asking. All 3 are true. Daniel folded the offer once and pushed it away. The 8 weeks had not vanished. But the promise behind them had. Sophie would have understood why he took the safer answer. That was what made refusing it costly rather than heroic. The board chair turned to Claire. Did you spend the night containing an employee's decision? Or did you authorize this operation? Claire could have chosen the first answer without calling Daniel a liar. It would preserve the reopening plan and her regional authority. And she could ask for mercy on his behalf after the call. Instead, she looked past the camera at him. Mr. Cole opened the lodge without authorization and promised more than he was entitled to promise, she said. I am responsible for every room opened after the county's overnight request, every dollar of overtime, and the decision to continue until 7. I also agreed to remove him from command without consulting him. Even though our operating plan required joint decisions, calling the entire night his incident would be incomplete. The board chair's expression hardened. If that is your answer, the board will review your authority as well as his conduct. The refinancing presentation stops today. Do you understand? Yes, Claire said. Then answer once more. Did you correct him? Or did you join him? I corrected his first decision, Claire said. He corrected several of mine. Then I joined him. The board recessed for 9 minutes. The screen went dark. Daniel placed the rejected offer face down between them. Beyond the open door, breakfast carts kept moving. Claire met his eyes. Each gave one small, unsparing nod. When the call resumed, Claire was suspended from regional operating authority pending review. The reopening would remain postponed. Daniel would be placed on leave, but the board withdrew the prearranged separation terms until his employment review was complete. Existing housing policy still allowed him to remain in the staff residence during that review. No one on the call described the outcome as a victory. At 9:12, the county announced a controlled reopening of the lower highway. The coach would leave first, followed by the 6 cars and the family from the disabled SUV once a tow had cleared the shoulder. Room keys returned to the desk. Cots were folded in the conference rooms. Marisol checked names against the original count until the last of the 63 travelers had boarded or left with county approval. There was no applause. Most people were tired, grateful, and ready to continue lives that had nothing to do with the lodge's board. Daniel carried an empty soup pot back to the kitchen. Claire removed the operation sheet from the board and left the head count visible until the deputy confirmed 0 travelers remained. Only then did they stand together by the doors. You were right to open them, Claire said. You were wrong to promise the building before the people running it had a choice. Daniel accepted both parts. You were right to make us count what we had. You were wrong to take my name off because asking me was inconvenient. It wasn't inconvenient. I thought it was too risky. That's not better. No, Claire said. It isn't. Recognition did not repair their jobs or restore the reopening. It did something smaller and more useful. Neither of them had to trust a flattering version of the other. Claire handed her lodge keys to the corporate manager before she left. Daniel remained on paid leave under the standard review policy. and Sophie remained in the staff residence while the process continued. Claire did not offer him a promotion, a settlement, or protection she no longer had the authority to provide. 9 days later, they saw each other again at the county debrief. Claire told the coordinator that Daniel's first promise had exceeded his authority before she described how his room plan and kitchen decisions had kept the response workable. Daniel, when his turn came, stated that Claire had protected the West Wing from being opened beyond its actual capacity, and that he had forced 13 employees into a commitment before asking for their consent. Neither softened the other's mistake. Neither used it to erase what followed. Outside the county building, Claire asked how Sophie was handling the uncertainty. Daniel said she'd begun packing books before he told her to stop. Claire did not promise that the apartment was safe or that she could fix the review. She only said she shouldn't have to guess what the adults haven't decided. No, Daniel said, and I shouldn't have made you guess whether I'd follow the limits once we set them. Claire accepted the apology without using it to excuse her own choice. I should have called you before I took your name down. Even if the answer cost us the support, they parted there. It was not reconciliation by convenience. It was the first conversation they had finished without a building, a board or 63 strangers requiring something from them. 3 weeks after the storm, when the lodge had reopened under interim management, Claire returned in her own car. She wore no company badge and carried no binder. Daniel was completing a required inventory handoff in the kitchen before leaving for the day. He met her in the lobby, where the glass doors stood open to a clear afternoon. The old notice had been removed. Nothing on the entrance required either of them to stay. Daniel told her the employment review had ended that morning. He would keep the kitchen position, but the lodge had separated staff housing from disciplinary decisions. Sophie would no longer have to pack because of an argument at work. And you? He asked. Claire said the board had offered her a narrower corporate role with no authority over the lodge. She had declined it. For the first time since the storm, she said this without sounding as though she were presenting a decision for approval. Daniel nodded toward the open doors. I was going to get coffee before I pick Sophie up. You could come with me, if you'd like. Claire studied him for a moment. Is this another decision you've already made for both of us? The question held no accusation now, but Daniel answered it carefully. No, this one only happens if you say yes. Claire stepped beside him. Then yes. Daniel held the door while she passed through it first. Outside, the road into town was clear, and neither of